So to get us started, many of us are experiencing an increased demand in our work lives, our personal lives, so our stress levels are going up as an impact of the pandemic. So throughout this, we'd love to know some real practical, tangible tools that people can test and try themselves. And before we go there, I'd love to just get the short version, because I could talk to each of you for about 8 hours to go into your story and all the things you've learned. But what's the short sort of version of your personal journey? So your connection to this topic around mental health, but also, is there any regional context? So around stigma that you perhaps faced or discrimination in discussing or thinking about your own mental health story. Joe, I'd love to start with you.
Hi, Petra. Thank you very much for having me here. My story starts, I think, about 10 years ago, when that was my last corporate job in 2009. And like I think many of the other panelists, I needed to feel that I had more meaning in my life. It just felt like there were problems in the world in the newspaper, and I wasn't doing anything that related to that. I used to work on the Strand for the Pearson Group. And I had an opportunity to do nonprofit work and help fight terrorism in places like Syria and Iraq using technology. And we had lots of funding from the World Bank, USAID, etc. And we had backing of prime ministers and presidents. And doing that, I began to realize that to make real change in the world, it doesn't take any of that. It takes one thing that gets into the hand of somebody who really needs help. And it works for them. For that, my husband and I moved to India and tried to set up a company that would help elder care because we were going through, he had a parent who was dealing with mental health issues and sort of was aging. And we raised money because we had such a great track record between us. We had won so many awards. We sort of got a lot of people giving us money even without asking for it. And by the time that money actually arrived in the bank, I had realized that the product that we had built, which was an AI engine to detect how somebody was, had no product market fit, that people did not want to use it. It was a product before its time, or we couldn't figure out Facebook marketing or something. My relationship with failure so far had been very healthy. I was very comfortable failing at what I tried to do. But for the first time, because my reputation had been used to raise money, and it was, for us, it just felt like I had to choose between telling a story that wasn't true or losing my reputation anyway. And I started trying to do anything to succeed. And that just meant that, my goals went from trying to solve the problem to trying to just solve Facebook marketing to just trying to get out of bed and have a bath. And I was failing at all of them. By the end of it, I realized very late that I was in depression. But all I knew was that I had told everybody stories all my life. I had full-on imposter syndrome, that every success that everybody thought I had was just me leading people on. And to get out of it, for me, one, going through depression. So Wysa, what I have built, has been out of my own experience of what I wished had existed. But the way I got out of it was basically accepting reality, to say that, okay, it may be that I will fail at whatever I do and that I'm a fraud, but I might as well try to do something that is still meaningful to me. And then I said, okay, let me try to solve for mental health. And, if you are okay failing, then it's better to aim higher rather than lower. And
so you found
that got me
purpose.
out of my depression. So that's my story. And we've built Wysa, which now has 2.5 million users, has saved over 80 lives that we know of. They've told us that it's saved their life, and is used by the government of Singapore, by NHS in the UK, by hospitals across the world, and by people directly on their phone for free. So that's my story.
I love it. And I love that you turned that depressive episode into purpose, into answering a need. I'm just curious about the regional context. So like within India, when you were feeling that depression, was there a feeling of stigma or shame, not wanting people to know?
I think definitely as a founder across cultures, it's not so much about India because I'm a global citizen. I've traveled all over the world, but it is definitely founder depression is very stigmatized everywhere in the world because your team, once they begin to realize that they've followed a startup and that founder is going through depression, or investors, even your co-founder, who was in my case my partner, telling him that I'm going through depression was to me just adding more burdens to the already stressful journey everybody was having.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. We've got a comment right there saying they love Wysa already. So if you haven't heard about it, check it out. Geoff, over to you. Give us a flavor of your personal journey and any regional context. I know you're out from South Africa. Was there any stigmatizing over there?
Yeah, thanks, Petra. Lovely to see you again. And
yes.
Look, my story is very, very simple. My daughter's 13th birthday. Can you imagine how excited everybody is on your daughter's 13th birthday? I'm sure you can all resonate with how exciting that day was when you became a teenager. Well, on my daughter's 13th birthday, I suffered a severe panic attack, which meant that at lunchtime that day, I was in a doctor's rooms, diagnosed with anxiety-fueled depression. Now, my understanding of the word depression back in those days, this was in January of 2008. I mean, my understanding of that was, it'd be raining on a Saturday morning and I want to go for a bike ride. And I would turn to my wife and say, I'm depressed. And she'd say, why? And I'd say, because it's raining outside. I mean, yes, I'm South African, but, I came to the UK when I was working for Unilever in 98. And I remember around January time, people used to talk about a thing called SAD, seasonal affects disorder. And I used to say, what's that? And they'd say, no, it's the weather. It can influence your mood. And I remember thinking to myself, what a snowflake. You need to man up. The weather influence your mood? Well, guess what? Here I am on my daughter's 13th birthday, diagnosed with anxiety-fueled depression. Took me 3 months to get better and reintegrate back into Unilever. But you know what was the most powerful? There were two things that drove my recovery, and they were the most powerful drivers of my recovery. And it was all about me making a decision when I left the doctor's room. And when I walked out of that doctor's rooms, I made a decision not to be burdened by the stigma that is associated with the illness. And so I told people that I was suffering from anxiety-fueled depression. Well, you know what I got back in return? I got the most unbelievable outpouring of love. Love. Just think about the power of love. How many songs have been sung about the power of love? And just feeling loved in my darkest moments is what kept me going. And the other thing that kept me going was a sense of hope. I used to meet with a friend every 10 days who had been 2 years prior, had been so ill that he'd been admitted to the Priory. And I saw he was better. I saw he'd got better. And he gave me hope. And so love and hope were the two biggest drivers of my recovery. And that costs nothing. To give somebody love and to give somebody a sense of hope, it costs us nothing. I go back to Unilever, I reintegrate myself, and then in 2012, I lose a best friend to suicide. One of my closest friends dies by suicide. And the night he died, I lay in bed and I thought to myself, stigma has just killed my friend, and that can't be fair, particularly in the 21st century. How can it be fair that we cannot talk about our mental ill health when we need to do so? And I suppose that was the catalyst which led me to then do some work in Unilever and then leave Unilever in 2014 to go out into the world driven by a very strong sense of purpose. And that is to create workplaces everywhere in the world where people in those workplaces feel they genuinely have the choice to just put their hand up and ask for some help if they're struggling with a common form of mental ill health. Are there regional differences? Absolutely, Petra, there are regional differences. My work takes me all over the world, but as Joe said, stigma exists everywhere. It's just the layers of stigma that exist, which differ depending upon which part of the world they are. And there are also gender differences. Men find it very difficult to have this conversation. Men find it very difficult to ask for help. And you know what? There's a lovely saying, asking for help is not giving up. It's refusing to give up. And so all those men out there that are listening to this, and if you're feeling that you need to go and ask for some help, just go, because it's refusing to give up. So that's a bit of my story and some of what I've noticed over the years.
I can see people are applauding already. I love how you named the gender difference, but also that stigma is everywhere, and stigma is the thing that kills. And where love and hope seem like fluffy topics, they're really the most powerful things that we need more and more of. And each and every one of us on this panel, but in our audience, can be the change daily, right? So just show the love, offer the hope, and get out of the cycle of doom and gloom. Martin, over to you, a flavor of your story and any comments on regional context.
Well, my story in a way starts with a challenging childhood, growing up in Lima in Peru, surrounded by violence of the guerrillas, the Shining Path guerrillas, and then as a result moving to the UK with my British father and leaving my Peruvian mother in Peru, and finding racism, unfortunately, in the UK, and going through some challenging years living through that. All of that, coupled with the duality of my background, growing up from an indigenous community background where there was poverty, but also certain privilege, having my father being British and having this opportunity, really was what shaped me at the beginning. But that trauma and those challenges from the very early years, I guess, culminated in some serious challenges and depression when I was 16. But out of that grew a determination, which I guess was, sometimes to succeed, we think that sometimes we use what we have in order to, and we think that's what we must use to succeed. So ambition grew from that, ambition to tell the world that I could be something special, to chase money, to chase credibility and working with big companies. And in a way that was a force for good, but there was also trauma and anger living in there. So I had the phenomenal drive to start from the very bottom, but then join big companies like Apple, like Disney, and then start my own company where I gave everything into it, became an absolute workaholic, only to find myself being challenged at a moment where the business was going so strongly, and then when it was hit by the challenges of Brexit, really having an existential crisis in the business and also in myself. So I had burnout. This was about a couple of years ago. I had burnout, anxiety attacks, and panic attacks, and probably mild depression as well then. But I'd never had, like Geoff, I'd never had a panic attack nor an anxiety attack. I didn't know what that was. All I knew is that I couldn't breathe. And I was grateful that I was grateful to have a ton of curiosity, ambition, yes, that still remained with me, but also a ton of curiosity, determination to kind of find the real solution and find the real me after being cut down to my fundamentals, my bare essentials, and trying to find the real me and the real purpose. And find that in a lot of compassion. Geoff mentioned the word love. For me, it was love for sure, but it was a lot of compassion and understanding what compassion is about, and ultimately surrendering. We are living still in a world of take, but we have to just, be in this moment and let it happen.
So surrendering to, I just want to make sure the audience understands what you mean. When you say surrender, what are you surrendering to?
Surrendering to what is inevitable. There was someone that there's many tools that I went through to find this recovery that I'm proud and excited and enriched by, and this blossoming that I'm now encountering. But I guess there's someone called David Rico, the great psychotherapist, teacher, and writer, that has wonderful books. And one of the things he talks about is the 5 givens of existence, the 5 truths in a way. And this is what I believe surrender is about: that everything changes and ends, yet good things can be renewed; that suffering is a part of growth, that yet you can always keep finding ways of bringing the good out of evil; that things do not always work out according to plan. So surrendering to them, yes, we can always find the calmness and composure to say yes to what is and thanks to what has been, and that life is not always fair, yet we can be fair and even generous. and that people are not loving and loyal all the time. Yet we do not have to retaliate, but can act with love and loyalty while giving others, while not giving up on others. So that's sort of what I mean by surrender.
Sure. And like I said, I want 8 hours with each of you, because we can go on the philosophical as well as the practical. Thank you, Martin. And Refiloe, please give us a flavor of your story and any thoughts around stigma.
Yeah, good afternoon, Petra, and hello to all the audience. Greetings from South Africa. You know, my personal journey with mental health, I would say, tangibly began about 9 years ago. At the time, I was in my early 20s, and I'd started working actually more than 9 years ago, probably about 13 years ago. And I was working as a personal assistant to the gentleman who now happens to be the president of my country. And for those of you who are wondering, I taught him everything he knows.
Good to know.
And as you can imagine, a very, quite a highly stressful environment. And many of us, we would not admit it, but we were the typical insecure overachiever, big on the inside, able to do amazing things. And yet on the inside, we were really struggling, but we weren't able to talk about it because it just was not the environment for weakness. Working with brave people means that you don't feel comfortable to be able to show your vulnerability. And, after I started working in the office of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, very shortly, about a month after that, I started something called Bikram Yoga. And it really, in so many ways, transformed my life. Fast forward now, I have a Bikram Yoga studio. I've done the teacher training, and it's an incredible journey. But, I walked into the yoga studio and I thought, it's going to be very simple. I've been a ballerina for 15 years. I'd done every sport imaginable from a physical perspective. I thought, I've got this. It can't be that hectic. But I very quickly came to learn that what I had come to learn on that mat was not the physical strength, but to really be dig deep and be resilient on the inside. So I'd come to let go more than I'd come to gain something new and learn something new. And I think that was really tangibly when I thought I really have a problem and I really have a challenge. And shortly thereafter, I booked my first therapy session. And after a couple of weeks, I really started to feel concerned about myself because there's certain parts of my life that I had completely blocked off. And I was not aware of it. And that's really interesting, right? And from a regional perspective, we are South African and we are predominantly a religious country. And so we pray about everything. We pray about struggles, we pray about rain, we pray about everything. We pray when it rains and we pray when it doesn't rain. And so when you say that you're struggling with a mental illness, you don't even know what it is. You don't know how to describe what it is. And the answer is always to pray, obviously well-meaning. And, my dream had always been to be able to bring the personal CV and the professional CV and to have them come hand in hand, right? We walk into organizations and we bring our professional CVs and we tell people why they should hire us, why we're good at what we do, and we give them all the evidence. We even give them references. But add to that, there's a human resource. And as a human resource means that there is a deeper story to who you are. There's a personal context that you paint, even operating in a professional instance. So how we deal with, how we react to things, how we deal with certain things that are triggers. Yes, okay, from a personal perspective, from a professional perspective, we're taught how to limit the crying, limit the any expression, don't cry, don't be too vulnerable. But there's also a person that walks into an organization with their CV, and that person should mean a lot to an organization. And so I feel so privileged and so grateful to work with corporations around the world who prioritize the human resource and who've really given people the platform to make it okay to not be okay.
Thank you, Refiloe. I'm smiling off and on, probably inappropriately at some of your points, but I love the letting go and the surrender theme that both you and Martin are speaking about. First of all, your Auntie Vuvu is in the audience and is very proud of you. So that's what I was smiling about, first of all. We've also got a comment after you said we pray for things. We've got someone saying we pray, sing, and dance. It's exhausting. So sometimes we need to think about other elements. So thanks for already throwing in some of that practical advice. And we've got a great question here. Joe, I want to just come back to you. we're all saying ask for help. It's healthy to ask for help. Go ask for help, ask for help. What about the people who don't know where to go, don't know what to say, don't know how to start? So you're depressed, you can barely have a shower. Who do you go to? Like, did you ask for help?
So you Google stuff. I realized that the one part
of it
that doesn't switch off is the part that goes online. I mean, it just might be me, but I think it's true for a lot of people, because the 2.4 million people who have used Wysa, we have not done an ounce of marketing. They've all got there by searching for help online. And many of them need much more than self-help. But the first port of call for many of them, say you're not financially independent, then you have to tell somebody before you ask for therapy. You have to get supposing you're not mobile, you need to ask somebody. So being able to access help, it's not free in the UK. There are long wait lists. Everywhere there's public health, there are long wait lists. Everywhere there's private health, there are still wait lists. We now know because we work with these organizations. So at that moment when you're panicking, at that moment when you're in crisis, people do call crisis helplines, but most people I know don't feel that their crisis is severe enough to call a crisis helpline. They feel like they don't even know if they're making a big deal about this and they should be handling this strongly. And I didn't know either. So for me, the idea of creating Wysa was exactly for those people who didn't know what to do, and to make it free and easy for them to be able to feel heard, to talk about what their personal context was, irrespective. So use AI in a way that it listens rather than talks or recommends, and then guides them through a sort of therapist evidenced sort of techniques that just might be, acceptance, surrender. It might be controlling what you can control, letting go of the rest. It might be restructuring negative thoughts, challenging them, self-compassion. All of those things are, to me, skills. They're not medicine. And those are skills that I don't have to wait till I'm depressed to learn.
I love that. Skills that are accessible to everyone. And I love that you're talking about the context. Great, go to therapy. But what if you're not a breadwinner? What if you can't access it for a variety of reasons? There may be just an extension of family and friends that you've got to practice some of this with first. Geoff, we've got a question in the chat box here from a founder of a tech startup who doesn't have a team yet. So he's saying it's lonely. How do you manage your mental health as a founder in a tech startup with no team, especially when you have people around you who are not supportive and will not want to take the risk of helping a company that isn't known or making money? So he's commenting on it being lonely. But the key question, and I know you've got some practical things that you do to look after your own mental health, how can he maintain balance? How does he keep himself going without giving up? A loaded one. Any thoughts on that one, Geoff?
Yeah, Petra, just really quickly on this. I mean, I can give people some thoughts and some ideas and some practical tips. But for me, the most important thing is, where is your health in your list of priorities? Because most people that I speak to, they put the oxygen mask on everybody else. They don't put it on themselves first. And an air steward once taught me, if an airplane goes down and the oxygen mask falls and there's my daughter sitting next to me, who does the oxygen mask go on first? It goes on for me first. Then I can look after my daughter. And I just think that more and more, we've got to take individual responsibility for looking after ourselves. Forget about everybody else in terms of our health. There's a lovely saying, if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll one day be forced to make time for your illness. Write it down. If you don't make time for your wellness, you'll one day be forced to make time for your illness. And I have a very simple acronym that I apply every single day, 60 minutes, to look after the most important thing in my life, which is my health. And it's called CAN DO. The C stands for connect. I connect with people. I connect with nature. I connect with friends. The A stands for be active. Take some time out every single day to go and be active. The N stands for try and be nice to somebody. Just try and be nice to somebody and see what that does for your overall emotional and mental health. The D, Martin was talking about curiosity. Be curious, discover, learn something new. And the O stands for observe, taking time out every single day to just observe. 10 minutes every 2 hours to just have that moment that you're in the present and you observe. And you know, Petra, I give myself 60 minutes every single day to apply can do. And then people say to me, where do you get 60 minutes in a day? And I say to them, there are 1,440 minutes in every single day. Don't tell me you haven't got 60 for yourself. And if you can't go to 60, then go to 15. And so to the person who asked that question, it's about you taking that individual responsibility, creating that mindset that your health is the most important thing. And if you can then go and do some of the practices that Martin and Refiloe and Joe will talk about, then I think you can better cope in the kind of environment that you talk about.
Thank you, Geoff. So many practical tools, and please, and especially if you're not commuting, we should be able to find an hour a day to apply the CAN-DO acronym, or a version that you experiment with yourself. So what works for you? Martin, I want to put a question to you that we received ahead of time from Hazel Vroman Wilger, sourcing and procurement global purchasing consultant in the USA. And the question is this: what signs should an individual be aware of to help them detect a mental health issue in others? And the reason I'm putting this to you, you talk about anxiety, depression, a host of things that you were experiencing. I wonder if other people could tell. Could they see, or were you quite good at sort of hiding it underneath the surface? And what do you look out for in other people to just give you an idea of what might be going on for them?
Well, this goes back to this stigma piece, right? And in my own case, for the last 15 years, I've been a leader. I've been a CEO and ran teams and built teams. So, and as you know, I'm a man. So we supposedly have to show a mask, have to have a guard in front of us. We've got to break that, and others have got to see that vulnerability. And in fact, there's a growing number of us that are empathic leaders, that are servant leaders, that are leaders that are leading in a new way with an open heart and compassion. And people want that. People want that as part of their who do I work with that's got purpose and the organization. But how can an employee or how can a leader spot that in somebody else? By cutting to the chase. Stop talking bullshit and just get on with it, and just sort of say, how are you? How really are you? How are you feeling? By breaking, by really building relationships with who you work with, and not just saying what's happening with this project or what's happening with that project, just saying, how is it? How are things at home? How are things with you? And talking about feelings, very simply, and just also saying, okay, that's not a feeling. Tell me how you feel. How you feel? I've been running and I feel happy. Let's go a bit deeper into that. Why do you feel happy? Just having those conversations with people. So I would encourage people to continue to break those boundaries, open those doors, keep communications. We are all in a network. We are all interrelated. We are part of nature. And like Geoff said, and all of us have these instances, let's not let others pass away because when we could have done something.
And really, you're coming from a perspective of we don't need to wait for signs and symptoms to be appearing to have these open conversations with your people and just get to know them. Thank you so much. Refiloe, we've actually got a comment in here, and I'm not sure who to ask it to, but just around substance misuse during COVID times. I'm going to throw that one out to anyone who feels that they can answer something around that one. But Refiloe, I'd love to hear some practical ideas of what are the things you do to look after or build your own resilience? And do you have advice for other leaders on practical things that they can do?
Yeah, so we have a running joke. We say that if I asked you whether you brushed your teeth this morning, whether or not you did, you would say that you did, because it's embarrassing to admit that you didn't brush your teeth. And so we brush our teeth in the morning and in the night, even if we're not going anywhere. We've all been educated on the importance of dental hygiene and also how to do it. And as it relates to physical health, we understand the benefits of exercise, and we know that it's good for us, and all of us have forms of exercise that we enjoy, whatever it is. And we also know the importance of staying active, and we know what to do in order to stay physically active. But, what happens to our emotional calories? What happens to our mental calories? What do we do to digest the things that are weighing heavy on our minds and on our hearts? And, for me, mindfulness practice is a wonderful way to do that, because it really helps to bring you to awareness of what you are experiencing. And when you are aware, you can make a decision. There's a wonderful practice that I like to share, and maybe it relates to the question that we've gotten around sobriety, and we call it a mindful sobriety practice. And these are just a few steps to follow when you are feeling overwhelmed mentally. So it really just gives you the gap between reaction and response, where you can really make a more conscious decision. And so SOBER is an acronym for the steps to follow, and the first step is to stop. So just to stop and to really be with what you're feeling, like Martin has said, have a courageous conversation with yourself. Ask yourself questions. What is the experience that I'm having? How am I really feeling? What's on my mind in relation to this? And after you stop, you go to the O, and that is to observe. So just allow yourself to really listen and to really hear. We spend so much time being busy, not attending to ourselves. And so it's come to the point where we all silence the inner voice. We actually don't have time for the inner voice. And when you observe, you really observe how you are relating to this challenge, but you also observe how other people are around you, right? So if it's about impatience, you can observe the other person, you can observe you, and realize that many things that we go through are not about us. And the third step is the magic mindfulness tool, and that is to breathe. And when we breathe, we calm down our nervous system, and it helps us to quell any potential fight or flight stresses. And so, when you breathe, you really can calm yourself down and bring yourself to deeper awareness, and really just pause in the moment. And once you've breathed, the E is to expand. And expansion is really about a broader perspective. Sometimes we see what we're going through as a big picture, not realizing that it's just one small thing in a far greater picture. And once we've had this expanded perspective, we can respond rather than react. And when we are stressed, we tend to be more reactive rather than responsive. And some of that reaction is maybe, drinking more than you want to be drinking, or doing things, acting out of habit and not necessarily wanting to do the things that you want to. But if you can give yourself that pause, you can give yourself the opportunity to make a better, more constructive decision for yourself in the moment that you might not regret later. And again, that awareness, it also brings you to vocabulary. Once you can start to talk about what you're feeling, what are your symptoms is. I think that a part of mental health stigma is not because people don't find that it's important. Sometimes people just don't know how to describe what they're going through. When you have a stomach ache, it's clear, my tummy is sore, and that's it. But the symptoms for depression, for anxiety, are not always very clear for us. And so part of the stigma is not having the vocabulary. So being able to find ways to describe how you're feeling, and being able to find ways, create communities where you can talk to people is so important. Like Geoff said, the power of love. And the power of love means not just being supported, but allowing yourself to be supportable.
I love that. Thank you. You covered so many bases. Geoff, do you have anything to add just to this comment? Can we talk about mental health and substance abuse? COVID and isolation is making us go to alcohol. It can numb feelings of fear and uncertainty. Any thoughts on, the connection point and how people can think about it?
Yeah, Petra, I think that's very real. I think it's very, very real. COVID-19, we all know the physical effects of COVID-19. We haven't spoken much about the psychological effects, and the factors that contribute to those effects: uncertainty, financial insecurity, the loss of a loved one, the fear of the virus, changing the way in which we're working on the front line and seeing people die in front of you. This is having significant psychological effects on people. And I say this as somebody who's not an addict, but I say this as somebody who suffered from anxiety-fueled depression. When I got the real moment of getting better was when I accepted the fact that I was depressed. And I think it's the same around addiction. You know, once we can accept that addiction, I think we can then go and ask for some help and know that there's a better future out there. You can recover. There is hope. And so instead of turning to the bottle or instead of turning to the drug, maybe just turn to a friend or go and see a doctor and just go and get that help that you need. And by the way, it's okay not to be okay during this time. But please, please think about a more professional road to recovery versus a road that leads to some form of addiction.
Thank you, Geoff. And I like the self-awareness of the person commenting that it's avoiding the feelings of fear and uncertainty. So maybe talking to a therapist or thinking, about those feelings might be useful. And as a recovering addict myself, I'm 13 years sober. What I do know connected to mental health is when I drink, the volume on negativity is out of this world loud. Like that's how the best way I can describe. Life's problems don't go away, but not drinking for me turns the volume right down. And then all the tools that people are talking about suddenly become more effective. They feel it's harder. We haven't got much time left. Joe, I want to ask you a question that's come in from Yuko in Japan. She's a senior associate, and it's concerning depression. So she says, when a cheerful person becomes depressed, I think it's funny how people think like a cheerful person. When I was the most depressed, I was hilarious. I cracked jokes all the time because I was like, let me cover this up, So it's like, how can we, there's both sides. When a cheerful person becomes depressed, it's very difficult to recognize it. So how can we notice what might be going on and help them effectively? So how could somebody else, maybe if you weren't ready, sort of seeing what was happening and ask the right questions or support it in some way?
So I found that often it's easier to spot it in cheerful people than to spot it in introverts. So folks who are always sort of keep things to themselves and are not very open about what they're doing, it's often harder to spot the difference. But when somebody is generally cheerful, if sometimes you'd see that their eyes don't reflect what they're saying. So generally in the eyes, you can sense it. I think we all have empathy that we can actually sense that there's something off, but we sort of say, no, but it's okay. I don't know if, there's symptoms that you could ask, but there are definitely ways in which you can open up the conversation where you talk about your own struggles, which is what I do. So I tend to open it up by saying, I've been struggling about this and could you help? And very often the person would open up and say, yeah, I also struggled. So being vulnerable myself is often my way of creating a space for other people, and also the acceptability of that emotion. But having said that, there are many times when, you can't be going around, especially in a workplace, sort of only talking about this. And I think it has to be cultural. So you have to do things over time where you've been vulnerable, other people around them have been vulnerable. And then if you do see that that person is just a bit different, they might still be cheerful, but the cheerfulness feels a little bit forced. Then you do have a conversation about, so how are you sleeping is a great question.
Yeah.
So something like that to start the conversation.
I love it. And it's starting with you. So absolutely with all of you, there's a theme of that approach is when we tell our stories, which is the point of this panel, we can give permission to other people to do the same. Thank you for comments and questions that are still coming in. And I'm just going to read out Hazel's comment. Thank you, all you panelists, for the great advice. Listening to everyone and their journeys gives a sense of inclusion in a very misunderstood and mostly thought of as a solitary subject. So thank you for bringing this topic to light. And before we finish in our 1 minute, I would like one word about the thing you each are going to focus on during this COVID endurance test to look after your own mental health. One thing. And I know you do many things, but what are those one things? Joe, what do you reckon? One word, 1 minute.
Acceptance.
Acceptance. Ooh, good one. Geoff, what's your one word?
Connection.
Connection, acceptance, connection. I'm learning so much out of these. I love being moderating these. Martin, what's your one word?
Faith.
Faith. We need another panel. Oh my God. And finally, drum roll. Refiloe, what's your one word?
My one word is processing. Process stuff.
You can't, what? Now I'm just like, we need another hour. Tom, give us more time. Great comments. People think it's a superb session. It's been wonderful. That's our time. Thank you, all of you panelists, for your openness and great advice. We appreciate it.